Good evening. I'm your host, Gone Far Afield. We live in a world filled with miraculous things. Yet in spite of all this, we cannot solve some of our most complex of issues. Take, for example, the debate over firearms in the United States of America. Both sides bring their best arguments, but cannot come to a solid conclusion that we can help each other to arrive at. How can we solve this? It is with the advent of artificial intelligence that we will solve this. I have uploaded the entire contents of the United States Constitution, as well as the court cases Heller v. D.C. in 2008 and McDonald v. Chicago in 2010, as well as 10 different opinion articles from both sides of the issue. So, can this artificial intelligence take all that information and solve the debate for us? Perhaps. Can it figure out what accent I'm using? Not a chance. But we might be able to find out just how this artificial intelligence will solve the gun control debate. I hope you find this information useful.
Of guns and absurd notions of Americans. The Second Amendment is an unlimited right to own military rifle weapons that will shred your venison before you eat it. And stockpiling multiple automatic machine guns is fair because Americans want guns. I realize that these stats are not apples to apples, but you feel empowered with a gun in Chicago, said a student for 90 minutes. Here are two obvious differences in the Second Amendment itself. Obama is coming for your family, and 2012 was stopped by armed students. One congressman put it like this: dogs will always have bigger weapons than yours. Gun carriers actively commit greater freedoms than 8 million women driven by Congress. Another bill put to a vote is listed by civilians using a gun to stop a giant FedEx strike. Our liberties have never been in such peril, and Clint Eastwood reaches us. It was alone with our schools almost exclusively, but when Britain switched to a less lethal gas, the NRA worked perfectly. Still, one is free to carry licenses in California, and $520 billion is hardly acceptable, said a good guy with a gun. Across the nation, states with lax measures of gun control have lower homicides per native household. But making universalistic claims has basically been paid for by strangers who are often racialized and always men. This is reflected not only in the attitudes of gun carriers, but also with gun militias on Saturday. I'm wary for self-defense while ignoring homes like New York, said journalist Brett Kavanaugh. This sentiment was intended for armed security guards in America. Meanwhile, Michael Bloomberg's silver bullets are more likely to be victimized than 8 people with an AK-47, but leftists emphasize warlike violence against women. So the question isn't whether firearms should all be sacrosanct, but simply where we draw the line with survey data. Terrorists can bring hand grenades on airplanes and bear arms for self-defense, but immigrants are a net contributor of Colorado Springs legislation. If you think you know what else stops bad guys with guns, then fall into the wrong hands. Otherwise we cannot shoot back. But making multiple automatic machine guns is fair because young children routinely swim and take baths. Australia beat the snot out of me with the hockey sticks ban and passed significant rollbacks on gun ownership. Since then, my wife knew something was amiss when the car blocked our little micro-burden. So making mainstream media at night with friends and neighbors is morally acceptable. Not all anti-right citizens are killed by assault weapons. Some examples must include mental and criminal records, and gendered inequalities only point to Australia for their absence. These guns are unreliable and mostly unavailable, says pilots and passengers. The same goes for people who are genuinely black. Although, I used snowball sampling and eerie numbers to keep pushing for change. Voter registration among teenagers was stopped by armed people with little training. Scholars disagree on how we regulate gunfire to a soft solution. I'll not be identified by his last name, because Americans want Bernie Sanders to run in 2020, Edward Snowden said to the window quickly. Hillary Clinton promised she would take executive action as president to stop mass spooning requirements for adults. Although maybe bicyclists will just run each other down a single city block to take away your ARs and high school student desks. I was chairman of the Trump campaign in Virginia, said the March for Our Safety to Save Citizens. And instead of adding ranges, we should be able to find studies that prove what we need to address. Nobody follows through with his swing and clangs his sword off the windowsill, and that's why filmmakers are returning to the Western genre in the 21st century.
Now who can argue with that? Until next time, this has been Gone Far Afield, reminding you you're working too hard. See you next time.